Hello and welcome back to the Wellness Check. Today's video is going to be about the logistics, the administrative matters behind therapy, including what many seek out in terms of which therapist do I even see. And this is all about, do I go through my insurance or do I do private pay? This will be mostly for people who do have mental health benefits on their insurance plan. Some insurance plans do have it, some don't. So I have a lot of people calling in, and sometimes people will say, I have insurance, but I don't want to use it. It'll be cash pay. Or some people say, I have to use my insurance. Do you take it? Are you a provider for it? So I want to go through all the ins and outs of that just to kind of help you figure out really important questions to ask if you are looking for a therapist. Let's start with insurance. If you have health insurance and it covers mental health, that's something that you actually have to look for in your plan. Then what you do is you search for therapists in your area who take that insurance. Not every therapist takes insurance at all. So we need to make sure that whoever you're looking for is credentialed with that plan. This is where it gets a little tricky, and I'm just going to use a very basic example. If someone has, let's say, Blue Cross Blue Shield, right? That's a pretty common bigwig insurance. They might have medical insurance through that plan. Go to the hospital, go to the doctor. But if you're looking for mental health, you actually still need to call member services and say, hey, do I have mental health coverage to see a therapist? And if they say yes, we also need to make sure that it is through Blue Cross Blue Shield. Nowadays, insurances have all sorts of different carve-out plans, which means that, yeah, you can see a doctor for medical stuff with Blue Cross, but we're going to use a different insurance, a secondary insurance for mental health. So that might be through something called Carillon or Beacon or Magellan or something else. And in order for your mental health to be covered by a therapist, that therapist has to be in network with the carve-out. With Beacon, with Carillon, with Magellan, not just Blue Cross Blue Shield. And that's where people get maybe frustrated when they're calling and say, well, my card says Blue Cross, how come you don't take it? Well, it's because the mental health coverage portion may be under another name. That's where it gets tricky. Using your insurance also has pros and cons, right? So the pros are obvious. It's, hey, I have a copay. It costs $30 to go see my therapist. Maybe you have a deductible plan. What on earth does that mean? If you have a deductible plan, then you don't really have a copay. You're paying into your deductible until you meet your deductible. What does that mean? Well, so if I'm a Blue Cross Blue Shield provider, I am contracted with them as a therapist, meaning that I use their rates to bill clients, not my out-of-pocket private pay rates. So what does that mean? This gets really technical. But if you have a deductible plan and you're coming to see a therapist, then you're going to be paying that full contracted rate. It might be $80-something, it might be $90-something, it might be $60-something. It's whatever is contracted with the therapist who takes your insurance. So that would be the amount that you pay every session until you meet your deductible. Well, what happens if you meet your deductible within 1 year before it rolls over? Most deductible plans go to what's called co-insurance. I know. Co-insurance is a percentage amount, where now, since you filled your deductible, you owe 20% of the contracted rate. Is your head spinning yet? So you were paying the 80-something, 90-something, whatever that contracted rate is for the contracted therapist, right? But now, because you fill your deductible, you only pay 20% of that. So it's a lot less. Maybe it's 10%. Maybe it's 60%. It just is in accordance to your own individual plan, and everybody's plan is different. Okay? Now, in that year, if you fill your deductible, if you fill that out of pocket by doing the rest of your co-insurance, then your therapy is free for the rest of the year. And it does happen. It really does happen. So that's probably the most technical form of information I'm going to give you today. That's the biggest pro, right? That's the biggest advantage, is that therapy does not have to cost an arm and a leg. We just need to make sure that it's a covered thing. We don't want to go to a therapist's office thinking you have benefits and you don't, because then you will be responsible for the out-of-pocket price, which is typically higher than the contracted insurance price, if that makes sense. A potential disadvantage of using insurance is that a therapist has to legally, ethically put down diagnosis. In order for insurance to be effective for you as a person coming in, but also to be reimbursed, like on our side, the therapist side, we have to provide a diagnosis, which is fine by most people. Most people don't care. Sure, put it down. It's the truth. It doesn't bother me. But there are some situations where they don't want insurance in anybody's business. They don't want insurance knowing anything. They don't want a paper trail. Maybe the person holds a career or a position within a career that if that were found out, they'd get booted out. I hear that a lot. So it's in their best interest to actually decline using their insurance and just pay private rate. If that happens, you will most likely sign a waiver with your therapist saying, look, I got the insurance, I got the coverage, I'm electing not to use it, just to keep everybody's bases covered. And you have every right to do that. If you're really worried about what the diagnosis is and how it might impact your career, your future career, you can do that. Another thing to consider with insurance is what the person is coming in for, because depending on anyone's plan, again, it's all very individualized, they might cover certain things and might not cover other things. So interventions or therapeutic practices that are typically not covered by a lot of insurance has to do with things like hypnosis, acupuncture, therapy for the treatment of autism. Some insurances don't even cover marriage therapy. If you're coming in for couples counseling, insurance won't cover it. That's not the case all the time. You just have to watch out for these things. So on our end, we have people that pre-authorize insurance, right? So if someone's coming in and they have insurance, we're going to pre-authorize it. We're going to get all the information about it. Sometimes that information is correct. Sometimes it's not. And that gets us into quite a pickle. But on your side too, it would be worth calling member services and saying, look, I'm trying to get my daughter into therapy for XYZ. Is this a covered thing? What if I want to come in and my husband wants to come in? What if we want to do couples counseling together, my husband and I? Is that covered? And ask those questions to see what the exclusions are. They're called exclusions. What's not covered. Because you might think, well, my daughter sees this therapist, that's great. Why can't me and my husband come see this therapist? And all of a sudden we're paying out of pocket for it. And it puts people in a financial bind, let alone like, okay, well, what do we do for our marriage therapy, right? Lots of things to consider. Some practices don't even take insurance too. So that's something to kind of look at, is if you're really wanting to use your insurance, make sure that you're doing your research on therapists and group practices that do offer insurance, or that take your insurance rather. Neither one is really better than the other. It just depends on what it is that you're looking for in terms of a therapist. If you really fall in love with one and you have to have that therapist and they don't take insurance, that does happen where it's like, well, I know you don't take insurance or you're not in network with my insurance, but we really need to use you based upon your expertise and specialty. So that's something that people do in terms of like going the cash pay route, kind of inadvertently. One last thing to look out for if you're going the cash pay route is something called a super bill, which is another positive advantage of going the cash pay route. This is one to use if you have insurance, but you're just not in network with the therapist that you're wanting to see. So let's say you come in and you do therapy and you're paying their private, like out-of-pocket rate, and it's really expensive. you might qualify for what's called out-of-network mental health benefits. It's a mouthful. But basically it means, okay, I saw this therapist, she's out of network. This is how much that therapist charges. This therapist is giving me, the client, what's called a super bill. This is a super bill that you can turn into insurance and they might reimburse you. And again, it's just according to your own individual plan. Some have those out-of-network benefits and some do not. It's worth asking, if I see a therapist that's out of network, can I get reimbursed? And those rates can look different. Sometimes they'll reimburse you 60% of what you pay out of pocket. Sometimes more, sometimes less. So if you're going the cash pay route, you really love a therapist, you have insurance, but you just can't use it with this therapist, ask for the out-of-network mental health benefits. See if you can recoup money on your end for therapeutic services. So I hope that this helps. I know it's the beginning of the year, or at least I'm posting this in the beginning of the year. I don't know when you'll watch it, but it's worth looking into when you're picking out your insurance plan year to year, just to make sure that mental health is covered. And if it is, who is it actually covered by? Is it covered by a carve-out plan, or is it through the primary insurance? And then you can start your research to pick the absolute best therapist for your needs. Thank you for checking in with your wellness. Have a great day.